So Escape from Tarkov just wiped, and even though I probably won't be playing it as much as I have previously, don't worry, I've still got you covered for the best graphics settings as always to increase your FPS and improve visibility. First off, we'll get the boring stuff out the way. Make sure you've got your Windows up to date, make sure you've got your graphics drivers up to date on your graphics card, and if you were to press the start button and type in game mode, make sure you turn on Windows game mode, and that will allow things to be automatically turned off in the background of your game to improve gaming performance while any game is running. And then after you've done that, you can go into the in-game launcher, go into your settings by clicking on your name at the top and then go in settings, and then there are two settings that you need to change in here. The first one is when I close the launcher window, and make sure the drop down option is set to exit the launcher, and then when I launch the game, also select that to be exit the launcher completely. This just makes sure when you're actually closing down the launcher or going into the game that it doesn't stay open in the background taking up your computer's resources. So obviously a little quick setting to change, but something easily overlooked. Now if you have a NVIDIA graphics card, you can go to your start button and type in NVIDIA control panel. Once it's open, the tab that usually opens on default on this NVIDIA control panel is the change resolution tab. Just make sure that your PC's resolution is its native resolution and the right monitor is selected, and you've got the native highest refresh rate possible selected as well, and then you can click apply and close it down. Next, we're going to want to go to Manage 3D Settings in the NVIDIA control panel as well, and you can then go to Program Settings. You'll see a list of all programs in here, but if you don't see Escape from Tarkov, all you need to do is click the Add button just to the right of the drop down, and then you can find escapefromtarkov.exe and then click Add Selected Program. Now this will be just different settings for the game specifically, and you're going to want to change exactly what I do. Anisotropic filtering is application controlled, anti-aliasing FXAA is off, anti-aliasing gamma correction is on, anti-aliasing mode is set to application controlled, anti-aliasing transparency is set to off, background application max frame rate is set to off as well, low latency mode is set to ultra. Then you're going to want to set your max frame rate to on, and then make sure your FPS is your monitor's refresh rate selected in the change resolution tab. And then you're going to want to change your monitor technology to G-Sync if you have a G-Sync monitor. And then multi-frame sampled AA or MFAA is set to off. OpenGL rendering GPU, just select your GPU in your system. For me, it's the RTX 3090. If you have multiple GPUs, just select the one that you're using for the game. And then power management mode is set to prefer maximum performance. Then you're going to want to change your preferred refresh rate, and then in brackets it will have your monitor. Just select that to highest available. And then texture filter anisotropic sample option, set that to on. And then texture filtering quality, change that to high performance. And then threaded optimization, turn that on as well. And then triple buffering, set that to off. Vertical sync, turn that off as well. And that is every setting to make the most out of your game through the NVIDIA control panel. If you want to know what each of these settings do, I do go into more detail in previous videos. These are literally copy and pasted for the last graphics setting video that I did for the last wipe. But also, you have a description box below this section and this selection box, which will give you a brief summary on what each setting does as well. If you're unsure, just give that a read underneath the box that you're changing. Now it's time to head inside of Escape from Tarkov and go into the settings there and change what we can to get the most out of your game. The first tab we're going to look at is the game tab. Now the majority of this is personal preference, like whether you want your health condition to always show or your quick slots to always show, but there are a couple of options in here that we will take a look at. The first one is automatic RAM cleaner. I recommend anyone with 16 gigabytes or less RAM to have this switched on. Basically this will just use a cleanup of RAM every few raids to make sure it doesn't go over a certain threshold and to make sure your RAM doesn't hit anywhere near the 100% limit. Most CPUs in modern systems have some sort of hyperthreading built into them, meaning that the tick box for only using physical cores is a great thing to test out and have on. So if you tick this on, this will stop your PC switching from physical and logical cores. This causes stuttering, and if it's just using physical cores, especially if you've got a decent amount of them, you will be able to get a smoother experience. Say if you've only got a quad core or something like that CPU, you might want to turn this off and have the switch. It will have stuttering a little bit as it switches from physical and logical cores, but you don't need to worry about it too much. But if you want that buttery smoothness and you can afford to, then make sure you've got this tick box ticked. And then you've got FOV and head bobbing, personal preference, but I have my FOV set to max and my head bobbing turned all the way down because I want to see out my peripheral, especially when I'm sniping, and I don't want to die with all the head bobbing and motion sickness. Moving over to the graphics tab now, this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time. First off, at the top, you're going to want to make sure your screen resolution is set to your native resolution, so whether that be 1440p, 4K, 1080p, etc. Then you're going to want to make sure your screen mode is set to full screen because that will reduce input latency. And then your aspect ratio is set to your monitor's aspect ratio, whether that be 16:9, 16:10, 4:3, whatever. As long as it's your native monitor aspect ratio, you should be all good. Then your overall graphics quality, if you move the bar all the way to low, this will allow you to change the least amount of things possible, and then it will change to custom as soon as we start messing about with things. The first thing we're going to do is texture quality. We're going to move that to high, or if you've got a really low end system, move that to medium, and then that will give you a nice differentiation between textures on top of textures. So say if you've got a bush in front of a building, you'll be able to see a lot more detail between the two textures and things won't blend in if something's moving between the two objects. Then shadow quality is set to low, not only to improve FPS, but to also improve visuals. If someone is lying in a dark room with some shadows about the place, you'll be able to see them a lot easier when the shadow quality is set to low. It will brighten the shadows up as well, which is a nice addition, especially if you're trying to spot people at a far distance. Object level of detail quality I've set to 2.5. Any lower than this and you'll notice pop-in, especially if you're moving through Streets of Tarkov, for example, which is notoriously the hardest map to run in the game. You're just going to want to make sure LOD quality is set to 2.5 at the minimum. If you can afford to go higher, great, but it does decrease your FPS quite a bit. Overall visibility, anywhere between 1000 and 1500. Again, any lower and then things will start to despawn when they shouldn't and you'll see pop in, and any higher and yeah, it just will be a drain on your FPS for no reason because the maps aren't big enough. I've set my anti-aliasing to TAA. I used to have it at TAA high, but now I've noticed it starts to smooth out the edges a little too much. If you have it any less, you can turn this off completely and then the edges will be super crisp and you'll see a lot of definition, but sometimes it could be a little too crisp and it'll look like you're looking at a crunched up newspaper at times. So I just do anti-aliasing at TAA, gives a nice smooth edge to buildings but not to every other object in the game, so you can still differentiate between two things and you can still differentiate between people as well. Resampling is set to 1x off. This is basically upscaling and downscaling. You don't want to do it, it'll make the game look a bit shit. And to be honest, if you're upscaling from a lower resolution to a higher one, although it should improve your performance quite a bit, it doesn't actually. And when you're downscaling, it should do the same thing. Doesn't actually. It's just a bit, odd. I don't know why the setting's here, to be honest with you. NVIDIA DLSS and AMD FSR, it's all set to off because I don't use it and it tanks the FPS and it doesn't work how it should. So we just leave all of those settings off. HBAO is set to high performance. SSR, this is screen space reflections, so water, window reflections, etc. That's set to low. I don't have this off, although it will improve your performance if you do have it off, but I like the whole slight reflection to things. You can spot out people with a reflection, say if they're standing in a puddle or something like that, you'll be able to see them a little bit easier than if it was set to off, and you can see things around corners. If you're looking at a puddle, you might see something that you couldn't see otherwise. So it's good tactically, but not good for performance. So if you do want it off, be my guest, test it out for yourself. Now, before 13.5, I was a big advocate of anisotropic filtering and NVIDIA Reflex low latency, but as you can see, I've got them both switched off now, because when I was doing my testing for this patch, it tanked my performance by almost half. So I have them off, and it just, runs a lot smoother in my opinion. Anisotropic filtering would have given you a nice crisp image and make the image look a lot nicer. Buildings would have had more of a texture to them and more of a fine defined line, but no, none of that anymore because it tanks the performance too much. Sharpness is set to 0.7, this is the default anyway, but with the new painkiller effect and it doesn't over sharpen your image now, you don't need to worry about that super crisp image when you take painkillers, so it's quite nice to have a little bit of sharpness to the game. And then you've got lobby FPS limit and game FPS limit, that's cranked all the way to maximum as it should. And then you've got the tick boxes down the bottom for high quality color, Z blur, chroma aberrations, noise, grass shadows, MIP streaming, etc. That's all turned off. Now, post effects will give you a 5 to 10 FPS decrease, but if you do want to turn post effects on because you don't like how grey the game gets, these are my post effects settings. Same as the last wipe. I love the look. It doesn't make things too vibrant, but it does add quite a bit of colour, and it just allows you to see in darker areas a lot easier. So that's my colour grading, that's my post effects settings, and that is how I went from having barely 60 FPS on Streets of Tarkov to having 80 to 85. Bear in mind that Streets of Tarkov in size has basically doubled this patch. So I've increased 10, 15, even 20 FPS in some situations on all maps, if not a little bit more. Obviously, other maps other than Street from Tarkov do run much higher FPSs anyway, but I use Streets of Tarkov as a benchmark because it's the biggest and most detailed map in the game, and I also use multiple systems to test this as well. A 20 series GPU, my 30 series, a 10 series, etc. All had varying results, but all had an improvement in FPS and clarity in the game. Have a look at these side-by-side images. This is as you boot up the game with all of your graphics settings reset after the wipe. This is what I was getting. This is what the game looks like. Clunky, head bobbing, noisy. It's a mess. And now look at it afterwards. Much better, much cleaner, runs smoother. It's better overall. I swear by these settings. You guys always seem to love them when I do these videos. Thank you so much for watching. If it did help you out, a like's always appreciated. Subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.